Okay, so I think that we are now live now. Okay.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sarah Rowlands, and I'm a lecturer in data science at the University of Exeter. Well, 2020 has been quite a rough year for everyone. COVID-19 has affected everyone's lives, and among those people, it has been women are no exceptions, obviously, and in particular, women in academia probably are affected quite a bit by COVID-19. So that's why we decided to gather here and have quite an informal chat about what we're going through, what could be the potential solutions. And well, speaking of like the problems and emotional labors that we're going through, I guess for me, I moved to the UK just during the COVID-19. I started a new job in a new country, and alongside with that, well, childcare and household duties and teaching and research. So it has been very challenging for me this year. And I think I can be sure that I would be way more productive if COVID-19 didn't exist. So it's been quite stressful and tiring at some points. So enough of me. I think I have to thank these amazing ladies that they joined me today. And I guess what I need to do is that probably we can start with one by one. They can introduce themselves, and they can also talk about what sort of challenges they're going through, what sort of emotional labors they're going through, and what sort of problems they're facing. And I can start with Brooke.
Thanks, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here this morning in Boston time. I know it's afternoon for many of you. I'm coming to you from Boston, Massachusetts in the United States. I'm an associate professor of communication and network science at Northeastern University. And I share, although I did not start a new job during all of this, I share many of your same sentiments. I'm a mom to 2 school-age kids. And my research work is on online activism. So here in the US, as many of you are aware, there's sort of multiple intersecting crises happening. Childcare has always been a challenge in the US. It's exacerbated now. A lot of childcare facilities have closed and schools continue to not be fully open. We also, are not handling the pandemic in the best way we probably could have. So we never really, it's hard to say that we're experiencing another spike. We never really got the first spike under control. So we have been in various modes of lockdown the whole time. On top of that, there's, of course, the kind of social crisis of racism that's happening. The police murdered yet another Black man over the weekend. And so there's ongoing protests for that. And of course, the tiny election that we have happening on Tuesday of next week. So needless to say, folks are under a lot of stress. I would say that everyone is sort of beyond the ends of their ropes right now. So in addition to the labor, involved with trying to orchestrate a childcare situation, trying to move our classes remote, and trying to figure out all that, there's also, and I think women are picking up a lot of this slack, a lot more labor just to manage everyone's feelings, right? So students are melting down over things that are in a typical semester they would figure out on their own. Colleagues are melting down because they're just exhausted. So I find myself doing a lot more mentoring, a lot more guidance for students, and a lot more reassuring. All set against this backdrop of I'm not sure it's going to be okay, but we sort of have to put on this brave face, especially for those of us in somewhat more senior positions, that I feel like it's our job to kind of keep everyone going, which can be exhausting all by itself. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, Great. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to have you here. So I think the next person we can go with Olga. Can you please also give us an overview of yourself and what you're going through?
Sure, Sarah, and thank you for organizing this meeting. So I'm speaking from another part of the world, in Latin America. I'm from Colombia, specifically I'm in Bogota. I'm a full professor at the School of Medicine at the Department of Public Health at Universidad de los Andes. And I relate to what all of you have said. These are difficult times. I'm not a mom, but as in Latin America, we take care of others. And I take care of a mom who is 90 years old, and that's what we are expected to do it during the pandemics. It's even more challenging. And as Brooke said, we're concerned about our students. They are overwhelmed. We're concerned about our colleagues. And I think in terms of what we are seeing for women is that those inequalities, those disparities that already existed, we can't ignore that already existed, are right now more visible for us and are right now more exacerbated. So I think we are in a position that we need to invest more time mentoring to our students, taking care of our family members, and also, if we have time, because there's not much time, also relate to other colleagues that are also having important problems. So this is the situation I see right now from this side of the world and that I'm experiencing.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks for agreeing to join us today as well. And next one is Anna. Thank you.
So, hi everyone. I'm Ana Maria Ramillo. I'm from Colombia. I worked with Olga Lucia in Colombia. Now I'm doing my PhD in computer science at Exeter University. And in my case, I don't have. I'm here like taking care of myself and my friends. And also, I've been feeling that pressure of not being home. Don't be with my family, like taking care of my grandparents or helping with my mom that is a nurse with COVID patients. So all these things we here are more segregated in some way that we here, particularly in Exeter, not in the rest of the UK, but we've been so like privileged of not having so many impact of the disease. But at the same time, it's this constant worry of like we are not taking care of our loved ones. So that has been there, and also that we are now building our networks. So we are trying to connect with more researchers. So this lack of like social interaction and opportunities has been more difficult for us right now.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And the last but not least is Mariana.
Hi, thank you so much, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here surrounded by women, talking about women and empowering women. So I am Mariana Macedo. I'm a PhD student in computer science at the University of Exeter. I have been actually working on identifying gender and socioeconomic differences in human behavior, such as mobility. And my perspective today comes from a Latin American woman from Brazil, living abroad without any known disability, without having anyone to take care. So as actually a PhD student living abroad. So for me, working at home is like you never leave your workplace. So you feel pressure to work at night, you feel pressure to work on weekends. So you kind of feel like you are always at your workplace. But I think the best decision that I took in this pandemic was actually to invest in the workspace at my home. So having an extra monitor, which is a small thing that I could do for me, was very powerful to give me a comfortable place to work, to be a little bit more concentrated. So I definitely recommend investing in your in your space that you have at home to actually work. I think for PhD students, we have this tendency of thinking that we are not good enough. And I think it's like a daily challenge for us to kind of try to focus on our work, focus on the process, accepting that bad days will come, that will go. And we just have to like trust the process, trust in our supervisors, and letting the time come to the end, like, you know, come to something fruitful.
Yeah, thank you. I totally understand what you're talking about. I think Olga Lucia just touched on this topic that we all know that women, we are kind of dealing with this gender imbalance and gender gap. So I think the next question that will come up naturally is that, so do you think that this pandemic has made it worse, or I don't think it's not better, definitely. So do you think it made it worse, or it hasn't changed it? Or even also from your perspective, is it worse in those countries that they have low or middle income economies? So yeah, I personally think that women, because generally they earn less, they save less, so they're more vulnerable to this fact. And also they tend to be having this kind of like informal jobs, working in formal sectors, and that's why those sectors are more affected by this pandemic. And also I read it somewhere that based on a new UN report, is this pandemic that we have is one side, and there's a shadow pandemic also happening at the same time for women and girls, because one problem is that the increase in number of domestic violences is one thing that they are going through, and also loss of job and loss of employment, and because they tend to be in like, the sector that they are more vulnerable and informal and less secure. So I would like to know, your opinions about this matter. We can start, I don't know, with Olga and Mariana, either of you. Maybe you can start. We can start with Olga first and then go to Mariana after that.
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. That's a very good point. And as I said, I think we all have to recognize that these inequalities, this disparity existed. And the pandemic, as with many of the inequalities in the world, the pandemic is providing more visibility to those, but in some cases, like in gender disparities, is also exacerbating those disparities, and we need to be aware of that. Specifically in Latin America, and talking a little bit about research, because many of us are in academia, we don't have a lot of information of those inequalities. We rely a little bit more of what has been done in high income countries, but I imagine we have the same pattern, or even a wider disparity of what we see on research in terms of publications or in terms of grants. So I think that's something that we're seeing in academia. Also, as you said, women in Latin America is not different, are more likely to be in informal jobs. And now with their reactivation, we're seeing that the reactivation is providing more jobs actually for men. And we also know that as women, we spend more time on domestic, non-remunerated jobs that usually are overlooked and underestimated. So these jobs are also more visible right now for women. And as you said, during the pandemic, domestic violence has increased. That's a huge problem. We don't have really good mechanisms for providing safe networks for our women, because they are experiencing a higher violence in their setting. So I think that's something that we really need to take into account. The other thing I want to underscore within the context of taking care of others and of what we do as women is that I always want to underscore that as women, we're wonderful taking care of children. And actually, well, I don't have children, I have nephews and nieces, and I think that's wonderful when we take care of them. I take care of my mom, she's 90 years old, and I think we should be able to do this wonderful job. We should be able to take care of that, to embrace the job, because that's so vital for any society. So I think society should value more that. And now that we're seeing the exacerbation of many of these disparities, we also as women need to recognize that many of this work that we are now doing more in our settings because of the pandemic is something that is so important for society. And I just wanted to end here to bring a recent work that we did in basically with data from Brazil, in which we analyze the effect of female political representation on mortality among children. Children who are less than 5 years old, which are a very important population. And we found that those municipalities that have female mayors, or that have more women in power in those federal chambers, were those municipalities where we see an associated decline on mortality. So I think there's a moment that we have to really come up with innovative ideas in which we combine this wonderful work that we do as take cares and this wonderful work as we do in the academia. So I think sometimes we need to think about how to change a little bit of the rules, because both jobs are so important for us and for the society.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's quite interesting. That research like shows like, yeah, if women are in power, we're gonna have a better world. So let's hope for that. Mariana, you're also from Brazil, and I guess you've kind of felt this from close distance, like that this gender gap exists, and also yeah, these problems are probably worse now because of the pandemic. Do you have any opinions on that matter?
Yes, sure. Well, Olga beautifully said the main points of gender inequalities and disparities, but I would like to add on top of everything that she said that we women are more likely to be single parents, and that's tough. So imagine you passing through a pandemic and you are the only one to take care about for the children. So this is really extremely hard, because as United Nations released news about it, some women have to choose if they are going to educate the children or if they are going to actually feed the children. So things can get even worse when you actually try to analyze some examples, some harder examples. And another thing that is important to highlight is that differences in race, it's even higher when you look for women, what is happening for women. So actually, Black women are the ones that are most impacted in productivity. So this is a huge problem. So of course, we women are struggling, but there are some other different kinds of groups that are even suffering more, and they need some attention too. On the other side, I read a paper from Professor Lynn Craig from University of Melbourne, and she did an amazing job about a survey asking how people was feeling in this pandemic. And there, in some families, men started to give credit to the wives, because now they realize how hard it is to take care of work, take care of the house, of the children. So we actually can learn a lot with this pandemic, being home, watching what people are doing. How can we actually help each other by watching us? What are the difference? How can we actually help is really important. And I think men can actually learn a lot in this time, how difficult has been to be a woman. I think that's the time to actually show them that we are here and we are doing a lot of work.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you actually mentioned that, because the role of men, because that brings this question that we talked about all these problems that women are facing. So what can actually non-women colleagues in the workplace do in order to make things a little bit better for us, for women? How can we get them to just help to have a better gender balance, science and in workplace in general? I think they definitely can be helpful. First of all, the first step is, I guess, they have to recognize the fact that women are more affected by this COVID-19, and by recognizing that, they have to be kind of proactive about it. So they have to be proactive and try to incorporate these effects in like whatever guidelines they're setting from now on, and just recognize the these difficulty that women are going through. Brooke, can you comment on that, and do you have any opinions on this matter, how men can be helpful?
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to speak from a more of a leadership role. So men as leaders right now can do several things to help create supportive and empathetic spaces for women to exist. So first and foremost, just like Sarah said, acknowledge the differences. So one of the most frustrating things that can happen from a leadership perspective is for women to have to prove that they're experiencing hardship in order to receive support. We have decades of research now suggesting that women are doing disproportionate caregiving, that in crises they tend to have to focus on that as opposed to things like publishing, writing grant proposals, and so on. So don't make us prove it again. It's true, right? Just trust that it's true, and put in place supportive structures to make that work. So one tangible thing that I've been asking men colleagues to do is to pick up the sorts of service work that don't need to be done by women. So there's lots of service work that frankly right now I think does need to be done by women. So women mentoring women, women speaking on panels like this. But then there's also lots of work that doesn't. I think men can be on all the committees that do things like purchase books for the libraries or make recommendations about how budgets ought to be allocated and so on. So to the extent that you can pick those things up, just take them right off the plates. Don't even ask the women to do those things. The other thing is to kind of invite people, particularly women in your groups, to speak up about these things. I think it's really tragic that women stay silent when they're in distress, and it really has to be a crisis before women will start to speak up. And that's too bad, because it means that we're losing a lot of women. We wonder where all the women go from the quote unquote leaky pipeline. This is where they go, right? So they get frustrated and they feel like no one's looking out for them. So look after the women that you work with and who work for you. Ask them how they're doing. Ask them what support that they need. Be proactive about that. Don't wait until they come to you, because at that point it's so late in their crisis that it can be hard to sort of get folks back on track.
Okay, yeah, great. Yeah, thank you. Anna, do you have anything to add to that? What do you expect from your male colleagues to do in order to make the situation a bit better or more tolerable for you?
Yes. For example, this panel was like the space was opened by a man in a very male environment here in computer science. So like these kind of initiatives, and in my perspective, I've been having a very good gender balanced mentorship. So my first supervisors have been men, but they have been always put women in my panel. So I think that having that role of mentorship by women, for example, Galucia and Brooke, it's so important for us because it inspires us. So being like seeing women, seeing Latin Americans, seeing underrepresented communities in academia, in power roles, is so inspiring for us. And like it gives us this opportunity to create networks with other people that passed for these experiences. And I think something that is so important is the recognition of us and women in all the stages. So the recognition in the senior levels, in the powerful roles, and also as students. So recognize that we don't behave the same as men, like we don't react in the same way. So these things of like if we are so shy and like if we don't feel worth it, it's like, I don't know, like like this necessity of being all the time about our problems instead of like we shouldn't be in that part. We instead should be like more empathetic with each other. So as Bro was saying, like come and see that all people is like a nice state and feel them, like make them feel more worth it and more empathetic, like not that you have to prove yourself all the time about what you do. And also I think something very important in society in general is like men in different roles respecting to women, because it has been proved, like there's the research that if women and men have the same work responsibilities, women tend to have like take more care. Perhaps they have the same work of time and their same workload. So this like for husbands like to also like try to equilibrate more in their homes, and for their colleagues like that, try to be more empathetic, try to know that like we are suffering different processes. So I think this relationships more than the paper and the collaboration and the co-authorships, like more as humans, try to be more empathetic with the others perspective would be so important for the non-women and non-underrepresented groups to help each other.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's for sure. That's very important. So I think yeah, we talked about men and how, or any other colleague, non-women colleagues, that they can help us in this situation. I think the next step would be like, can the government do anything, or your institution where you're working, can they do anything in order to help us, help the caregivers in general, which is all there's proportionally women. So is there any policy that they can make and you find it useful to have? Well, for me personally, I think one of the aims that I have as in my research is like, I would love to be successful on grant applications. And obviously in the current situation, being at home with childcare and all the other things happening, I find it quite hard to be able to focus and write a grant application and be successful, obviously, on it, which it might not happen the first time. So I personally think that because of this, it would be great to have some women-only funding opportunities. So at least it would be a little bit, I would say, a bit more fair in terms of like all these trouble that we're going through. So we would be compared against people at least that they're going through the same problems and they have the same issues. That would be one thing. And also, as for early career researchers, it would be good to increase the funding opportunities for them in order to increase the chance of getting them. So I would like to know what you think about that. We can start with Olga Lucia, if you have any opinions about how can government or community or institution, they can be helpful, help women in this crazy situation.
Thank you, Sarah. And I totally agree with you. We need to have specific, explicit mechanisms to provide more opportunities for women. It cannot be just you have to have a woman in your publication, or you have to have a woman in your grant application. I think to decrease disparities, inequalities, we have to have opportunities like the one you mentioned, opportunities of network of women who are putting together a grant to do research on women, but also to do other type of research. And that's one thing I've been trying to put in place. Like in my group, I try to have actually a little bit of a disbalance. Anna knows, more women than men, just because as professor, understanding and working in a macho-oriented environment, we need to be explicit on having more representation of women. So I think we, as you said, we have to have explicit mechanisms for more funding, for publication, and also in our groups, in our research groups. Sometimes it's difficult because there are not a lot of women representation, but we have to try how to have more of those networks. And that's something also that we need to do research on, is like to what extent, if we build these networks, we can lead to more innovative products, more knowledge that get to the frontier, and how we can reward these type of mechanisms. That at the research as at our academic institutions. But we also depend on our cities and our government. So I think that's also very important. I was going to give you just one example of my city of Bogota. We have, for the first time, one woman elected as a mayor, and she has put in place the importance of gender in all the policies. So from the academia, we're trying to support that with research. We don't have a lot of research on that in our settings, so we rely on high income research. So that's why we also have to do more in our settings. But these type of opportunities, having a mayor in our city makes us work a lot more, because it's probably one-time opportunity. We don't know if that's going to happen later on with other women on power, but that's one opportunities, and these windows of opportunities are so important for us. So I think these type of opportunities at the government, at the university level, we should capitalize those to provide more opportunities for women in academia.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like a very good opportunity. You're gonna take it now. Anna, do you have any other things to say to add to that?
Yeah, it's very different depending on the country and the situations. Because, for example, in our countries, when this crisis time arrives, like there tend to be a cut of funding for research. So it's so difficult. It was difficult before because we don't have as much support for research in our countries. And now that is less support, is like, there should be like more specific proposals for women and for underrepresented represented communities and caregivings, and also like have different like stages of opportunities. So these networks of women for young researchers, for finder mentorships, and this funding for professors to like have more women in the research groups. And something that we were talking, that Brooke mentioned it about the importance not just of fill the institutions with women and like put all of them and just numbers, is like the inclusion of women, like really inclusive. So giving them the reward and the worth that they that the reasons they are there, and like let them take decisions. So the importance of let them making policies and let them making change, not just put the mayor and let we had a mayor, but let them like work more, and like we as women can have and can help with that support, which is so important. Like also support each other instead of being attacking each other all the time would be so important, like a society.
Okay, great. Brooke, do you have anything that if you want to add something to that what the role of the government or community could be?
Yes, so this is one place where the US famously falls down. So it's becoming very clear, you know, that any sort of lack of infrastructure that existed to begin with is now catastrophic. And I think my, you know, sort of productive comment on that is that we relied in the US for a long time on organizations, individual organizations, so companies and academic institutions, kind of backfill some of that. So we get our healthcare through work. Our childcare is often associated with some workplace benefit. And now that that's all falling apart, we're really seeing the devastating effects of that. So to the extent that those of you who live in countries where some of these are a little bit more socialized, I think that's a real asset. It provides a bit of a safety net. And don't underestimate the power of that. So it was sort of breathtaking how quickly all of that fell away and how quickly it became a crisis in the US. I think we all knew that it was there and it was lingering, but when you have to rely on your workplace to get these kinds of support, and then you have this kind of pandemic where not only do these structures fall away, but also the workplaces that provided the support often fall away, then you end up in a real crisis. And I do think it will take a generation before we get back up to speed over here. And I think there's some hard lessons for those of us in the US to have learned to take away from the pandemic.
Okay.
There is a question that I think Ruben can answer because he's from US known people. So Ronaldo Meneses asks, in the US, we have affirmative action for minorities. Do you think there should be a specific grant applications for women only? Would this help improving on the situation?
I do think yes, particularly in the STEM fields and places where women are underrepresented for exactly the reasons that everyone's pointed out, that we know that women are, disproportionately unable to find space to focus on things like grant applications. You know what, if I could wave my magic wand, I would love to see a women-only grant opportunity that is entirely run and administered by women, so that way the structures of applications are, women-friendly. I think that we get stuck in this way of thinking about how to do things in the world. Do we really need a 15-page grant application right now, that requires lots of background research and everything else? Or can we think creatively about other ways that we might be able to support women? And maybe it's short-term grants, maybe it's low-cost things, right? Just to kind of get people through the next 6 months. I don't know exactly what the solution is, but I do think that creative thinking is really needed right now.
Okay. Thank you.
And can I comment a little bit on that one as well? I think the other thing in these networks and we can have funding for only women, we'll be also thinking about multidisciplinary research. I think having women from different disciplines, look at our panel. We are from health, from STEM, from engineering. I mean, we are able to think about creative research and innovation that will help it doesn't have to be necessarily women research. It could be other type of research, but these type of mechanisms could also show how as women with different disciplines in networks, we could go to frontiers of knowledge.
Great. Yeah, that is, I love that idea. Yeah, that would be great to get women support each other in some ways, like from different disciplines. And we can come up with some ideas that everybody would be involved. I mean, not everybody, but as multidisciplinary as possible. So I think the one thing that I would love to know, because here we have an amazing panel, like we have from all sorts of expertise, we have PhD students, we have professors. I would love to know, like, who do you reckon is the most affected category? Are these like undergraduates or PhD students or postdocs, and is it harder at the moment to write proposals? Is it harder to write papers, or is it harder to supervise students? I think, for example, one category that I think they have trouble at the moment is like the undergraduate. They are those ones that they're final year that are about to graduate, but the job market is pretty down. So I think they're quite lost at the moment, and they don't know whether it's better to wait for a year. Who knows what happens in a year? And also probably the early career researchers, also they want money, so they like to get some grant applications, or they need funding to be able to work more. And this is something that at the moment is a problem. So I would like to know all of your opinions about this. Who do you reckon is most affected? We can start with Olga Lucia now, since you were talking. We can start with you and then move to the other ones.
Yeah, who do I think are more affected? I think all of them. I try to see my undergrads, like the first year undergrads who are adolescents and are not having relationships. I think that's a total contradiction for an adolescent. I mean, they are being affected just by this, and that also is going to have an effect on how men and women are relating. So I think we have also, and we're trying from the university to pay attention to the first year, because we know social relationships are so important, and especially for women, what we're trying to put in place mentoring mechanisms, I think those mentoring mechanisms should be in place since the first years. We shouldn't wait until we have our graduate students, which are the ones that probably are more close working with us on the research. I think we also need to put in place mechanisms from the undergrads. Sometimes it's too late. They just come with something, and women come accepting things that they shouldn't accept in academia. So I think it's hard for undergrad. Obviously, it's hard for graduate students because they are thinking about the job market and they see those inequalities by gender, by SES, and there are not a lot of opportunities. So I think it's been hard also for the graduate students and for PhD students. You look at you guys, you went abroad, and learning is more than just taking a class virtually. I totally think that the learning experience at all levels imply networking, that it's nice. And when we see people, we see all each other and in person. And talking from Latin America, I mean, we are so social. Imagine the virtuality in other cultures. Imagine the virtuality in Latin America when we have to have the social distance. We cannot talk with people. So I think it has been hard at all levels. And I think we need to think that and this is taking a lot of time and it's going to take more time. So we need to think right now what are the mechanisms at all the level to do a more effective mentoring from undergrad to graduate to PhD students.
Absolutely. Yeah, Mariana, so you're a PhD student. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I feel that the reduction of social interaction is not positive to actually establish new connections. So I think for us, PhD, that, we need to discuss ideas, we need to discuss our results. So it gets harder to kind of have extra interaction. It was very good when we were at the university that we could talk with people in the kitchen while drinking a tea, and then we would have like a surprising idea by just making a tea. So I think we are losing a lot about these little interactions with random staff going to the kitchen. But for sure, I believe that for professors and for lectures, it has been harder because I had to do a video for an online conference, and I had to spend the entire day to do only a 5-minute video. And imagine having all the module transform to online version. I believe it's an incredible, overloading, challenging task. So I think this has been very hard on the staff, on the professors. I have been hearing a lot of complaints in this sense, but I believe that the university here has been helping the staff and the professors by hiring more PTAs, more technical assistants, so the university can help everyone. So we learn a lot by being teaching assistant. The professors have some help. So I believe we can actually work together to get through of these. But I see a question here that I think it's really interesting for us to touch on it. That Ronaldo Menezes is asking if the gender gaps were smaller in some point. Did we see any time in the history that it was a little bit better? What do you think?
I can at least partially answer that. So we saw in computer science, in the US anyway, we saw a narrowing of the gender gap in the mid 1980s. So I think it's an interesting case study because it shows that, just as computers were sort of becoming a new industry in the US and around the world, women were coming, right? So women are sensitive to these kinds of shifts in the job market. And it really, for me, draws out how the culture of what then emerged inside computer science programs and computing organizations potentially widen that gap. So the gap has actually been getting bigger over time and not narrowing despite a number of interventions. So it just really drives home this idea that creating sort of supportive and inclusive cultures inside our departments and our programs makes a great deal of difference. It's not that women don't want to be doing this work, in computer science or any other field. It's that sometimes they don't feel welcome to do the work. So I'd like us to be extra mindful of that right now.
And Mariana, if I can comment, that what we learned from other pandemics that were not as big as this one, like MERS or initial pandemics like SARS, is that in those critical points, women are always more affected. Caregivers are more affected, and always there's a gap. There's some documentation, but since that's happened, and then we go back to normality, people tend to overlook that. So I think historically, wars, crisis, pandemics always increases the disparity. So we are expecting now that is even increasing more. So I think it's time to be very vocal and have specific actions in our settings.
Thank you. I think follow up on the previous questions that we had about what level is more affected or not. I think in this panel, we have the benefit of having two experienced academics, Olga Lucia and Brooke. So we would love to know, how can we make our research a bit more resilient, or how do you call it, pandemic proof, or somehow make our network in a bit more stable way so we would not be affected. Hopefully there's no other pandemic coming up, but if this one finishes magically and everything goes back to normal, how can we make our research and networking a bit more resilient and robust? What do you think? We can start with you, Olga Lucia.
I think difficult to think that we're not going to have another pandemics given the trends. So yeah, we need to be more resilient at all levels. I think we know what to do. We need to be better mentors for. I mean, at the academic, we need to improve mentoring. That's something that we have the word. We know we have to do mentoring, but I don't think we are that effective as mentors for our women. So we need to have more concrete mechanisms. The university have to have more women, in our case, more women in power. And we have to be explicit on the balance. That should be the balance mechanisms. That's at the university setting, and of course at the government. I mean, the funders from our government, they need to take into account that we are different, and those differences are good. That we have some periods of our lives that we want to be a mom all the time, and we should have the opportunity to enjoy that time, and that shouldn't jeopardize our promotion or our publications or our funding. I mean, I think recognizing that period of time is so important, and we have rights to have it. I think that's more a government thing. Our universities, and I have to say, my university have different policies. Actually, they even have policies for men who have children, so they can have also some father leave or maternity leave for them. So I have to recognize that my university in that sense is unique. But I think we need to have more strong mechanisms, and we have to advocate for funding just for women. This is the time to advocate for that if we really want to have a difference, at least in a little bit of the funding and the academic component.
Okay, great, thank you. Brooke, what sort of advice do you have for young researchers to stay more pandemic proof?
I mean, my best advice for the younger women academics is to collaborate with women. So I would like to believe that all men could be good, empathetic collaborators as well, but that's not proven to be the case. Of course, there are some, but it is, in my experience, having teams of women working together sort of bakes in some of that resilience. And I, can give a case study of, I was editing a special issue with two other women who were moms as, one of them discovered she was pregnant, another went through a divorce, and, then the pandemic started and so on. And there was just this, kind of unspoken agreement that each of us would pick up the slack for the other ones, and we didn't need to like point out who was doing more work when. So it was such a fulfilling collaboration that I would seek to replicate that and would encourage everyone to. The other thing that I think is hard is to ask for help. So once you have these kind of collaborative relationships, don't suffer in silence, right? So ask for help when you need it. That's why we collaborate, right? We could just write books on our own. That's how academia used to work. But we don't work that way, precisely because we know that this is a team sport. Right. So ask for help when you need it. You know that you're going to be able to pitch in more later on. My favorite sort of fun fact about women in academia is that it is true that our productivity goes down in the years immediately after we give birth, and we're doing some of that intense parenting. But then women who are mothers, their career productivity is up relative to men and women who are not mothers. So I think there's some evidence here that we do sort of step up and contribute in our lifetime career. So there's these little moments in time where we might be able to do less, but overall we do more. So invest in that long-term vision of the women colleagues and peers that we want to have in academia.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's very good. It's just, I think, women supporting each other is also as important as men supporting them. So we talked about all these, well, not negatives, but a little bit of problems and issues. I think there are some positive sides about staying at home and working from home, I would say. Personally, I have two very young children, and I think from my childhood, I always remember that when my mom was working, I would have loved the days that she was taking off and she was at home with me and spending time with me. So I think one of the things that I love is that I get to spend more time with my children and also see them growing, because this time they will never come back when they grow up. So this is regarding family, but regarding work, I think no commute time is very important. Or when you want to meet somebody, there's no need to fly to the other side of the world and go through the jet lag and all the problems. So this is kind of like a positive side for me as well. But I guess you guys are also like going through this thing, and then there are some aspects of working from home that you guys love as well. So I would love to hear, like, what do you think is the best about staying at home and working from home? Brooke, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with the lack of commute. That's a dream. I think for me, the favorite thing is the kind of reduced friction on stuff like this, that this would have been a hard panel to pull together in person, probably impossible. So we're able to, in relatively short turnaround time, propose ideas, find a diverse and global panel of people to come together and have a conversation like this. I also am the founder of Women in Network Science, and one of our members just sort of put together a Women in Network Science speaker series, pulling, again, women from all over the globe in different disciplines to speaking about their network science work. And something like that, of course, could come together, but would require funding and planning in a different kind of way. So I am excited to see those kinds of cross-disciplinary and global collaborations and opportunities to interact that I think people are being very creative about right now.
Yeah, great. Anna, how about you? What do you find the positive aspect of staying at home? I think you're muted.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you listen to me? Okay. So something that for me is very important as women, as an academician, is that particularly in Colombia, like how do you like your physical appearance is so important. So we sometimes spend a lot of time like preparing ourselves in the morning just to arrive to the work. Thanks God, academia is not as hard with that, but still we have some like moral thing there. So right now, and being here like kind of time for myself, it has been so like constructive. Like I've seen my my life in perspective, and now I can have like my own time, my freedom to do the things that I like most. So I think that for us that are not caregiving, like it's a moment also to take that advantage of extra time that we have for self-love, like to take care of others in some way. Well, that's my personal opinion. If just self take care, it's perfect too. But I think something very nice and is that this like democratization of information that social networks and social media help us to know. So as Brooke was saying, like we can go to more like seminars, and it's easier to approach professors that are for us very important and was so scary before like to approach in real life. So having this opportunity of going online to different places to see different conferences has been so nice. I have the experience of a friend that told me that in Middle Eastern countries, for them going to a conference would be so hard, but now that was online was super nice for them. So I think that that's something that I really appreciate, and something that like it's struggling on that is like starting the new networks. So I think that we can have that advantage for the new students coming, like to help them. So like we get more empathetic too in this online environment, and have new like new tools for help them. And with this, I want to come with one question that there is in YouTube about the imposter syndrome, that it could be a huge impediment to advance as academicians, which is true. But I think these social networks, these friendship environments, this support to each other at the same stage, because for me, it's easy approach with a problem to Mariana that to a person in higher in the hierarchy. So like having this same stage support and these friendships outside work, it's so important, because it creates this self-inclusion in the groups. And I think that that's a role for us, like other PhD students, to help each other also, not to be the best PhD student ever, because we are a group and this is a team sport as work.
Thank you. Mariana, is it the same for you as well?
Yeah, sure. I agree with all the things. For sure, Anna and I have been talking a lot of how we are dealing with our emotions through the pandemic, and it has been wonderful to have someone to count on it. I believe being home is good because when you are not anymore productive, when you are feeling emotional or stressful, you can always make a tea and just sit on the chair and read a paper. Like, I'm gonna do some work, but I'm gonna just change where I am, do some like walk, jog. So I think this freedom of rearranging activities is really positive for us as PhD students, because sometimes we are just looking at the screen and nothing is really happening. So I definitely agree with everything.
I think, yeah, I agree with the flexible working hours. So whenever you feel like doing it, you can do it. And that's pretty good. Lucia, do you also find it better to, find positive aspects of staying at home?
Yeah, I think the pandemic shows the virtuality and virtual things arrive and they're going to stay here. And then we could be more efficient in some aspects. So I think in the future, interacting with others, but also have the potential to have all these virtual tools are going to be very, very good for networking and for decreasing costs on many of our research. I like that very much. The other thing is, and I have a study with breast cancer survivors, my women that they're part of a community. And I also, this helped me a little bit to be connected with them, and also at the personal level to connect with other friends, and especially my women friends from high school. So I think time that allows us to be at home and to have some breaks allows you to also think about how to be connected with others, which is so important for our health, for our well-being. So I think we have to embrace, and I hope we could also have these mechanisms after the pandemic to stay connected with others when they are not in your same city or when they are in other communities and it's difficult to connect with them. And the last thing, and I agree with Anna, is the self-care. That's something that we teach a lot in the research I do to women. Women tend to forget how important it is to do this self-care all the time because they care for others but not for themselves. So I think what the pandemic also give us a little bit more time to take care of us, either with what Anna said or by doing your exercise, by cooking, by eating and enjoying that. I mean, the pandemic show us how simple things could be enjoyable and how we miss simple things. So I think that, and as women, we recognize very much those details. So those are the positive things.
Great. And I think as the final comment, I would love to know your opinion that there's no doubt that in the next decade or even more, there will be research about this pandemic and all the effects that it had on people's lives. Are there any aspects that you personally working on, or is there something that you would like the research to be focused on? Olga?
I think resilience, and you said that before. I think we need to understand better the resilience of different groups in different parts of the world. I'm seeing how like communities that are very vulnerable are also more resilient. There's some research on that, but we don't know that by sex, by SES, by different regions in the world. So I think resilience in different settings in different parts of the world is going to be a very important research for humanity, for the world. And so I think that's one thing I would like to focus. I will put the health component because this is what I work, but I think in general, the resilience concept is going to be very important.
Great. Brooke, do you have anything in mind that you like the research to be focused on?
I second Ogle's suggestion to focus on resilience, and I would also I like in my research to take what we call an assets-based approach, right? So rather than thinking about all the ways in which women in this case are suffering, to think about all these resilient structures women have put in place in order to survive right now, and think about how we might bring some of those insights into creating socially supportive systems moving forward, not only for women, but for everyone. So how might we take a page out of the current, kind of reorganization that's happened around work in order to inform how our organizations could be more resilient and more inclusive of women and all sorts of minorities moving forward. So I hope that work gets done.
Great. Thank you so much. So I guess that's the end of today's chat. I think thank you so much, everyone, for finding the time on a Friday afternoon or Friday morning to join me. And I think it felt good to talk with some women about the problems that we have and also the positives that we go through. I guess I hope you all have a great weekend and hope to see you some other time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much, all of you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. It was great to be with you all.
Thank you.